of David Bowie.
Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on.
The singer died after an 18-month battle with cancer, surrounded by his loved ones.
Look up here, I'm in heaven. I've got scars that can't be seen.
Well, this was the 69-year-old's now very poignant last single, released days ago.
Family, friends and fellow musicians have paid tribute, led by his son, who posted this touching image of his father.
We'll have the very latest reaction to the death of a man who redefined modern music. Well, that is our breaking news this morning. The music legend David Bowie has died. Unbeknown to the world, the singer was diagnosed with cancer 18 months ago. He died yesterday, surrounded by his loved ones, at the age of 69.
Well, David Bowie's son, Duncan Jones, has led tributes to his father, saying, "Very sorry and sad to say it's true, love to all." Fellow musicians have followed, with Madonna the latest, saying that she is devastated at the news.
Sky's Ian Woods reports on the extraordinary career of the man who changed music.
David Bowie's new single, released just days before his death. Reviewers had already commented how the video was disturbing. Now we know he died after an 18-month battle with cancer. The lyrics take on new significance.
Look up here, I'm in heaven. I've got scars that can't be seen.
A public showman, but intensely private. Only those closest to him will have known he was so ill, which makes his death all the more shocking.
He is one of the giants of music of all time and of popular culture. And he is someone who has impressed generations. No one ever thought of David Bowie as being old. This is why his death is such a shock.
His career spanned 6 decades, and from the very start he sounded ahead of his time.
This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade.
His former landlady recalled an early performance of this, his first hit.
We were in the kitchen the day that he arrived, the day he moved in. And he just sat on a stool while I was cooking and played it. And he played his stylophone. And then my kids came home from school and he played it again. And they thought it was absolutely wonderful, just the most fantastic song, and that it had to be a hit. And of course they were right.
Born David Jones, he changed his name to Bowie because one of the biggest pop stars of the time was Davy Jones of the Monkees. But Bowie was the original, the innovator, constantly reinventing his image and his music to stay relevant right until the end. His makeup-wearing Ziggy Stardust character seemed to epitomise the glam rock 70s, but within a few years, he'd retired that persona. But the hits kept coming, into the 80s, both on his own
Ashes to ash and fire to fire.
and in collaboration with other stars, such as Queen. This duet, hurriedly recorded with fellow legend Mick Jagger, was released to coincide with Live Aid. Which also saw him perform one of the show's emotional highlights, Heroes. Bowie had also moved into acting. His first starring role was as an extraterrestrial in The Man Who Fell to Earth.
Stay where you belong! Go away! Back where you belong!
He continued to record and tour into the new millennium, but a heart attack saw both severely curtailed, and there was a pause until 2013 before his first new album in a decade.
The shocking, sexually ambiguous Ziggy Stardust took Bowie to global stardom.
There's a starman waiting in the sky.
From glam rock to a flirtation with the Philadelphia sound.
That's once a young American.
His 1985 duet with Mick Jagger was a major factor in the success of Band Aid, and still he continued to change to stay relevant.
You remind me of the Babe. Babe with the power.
Film roles too. He often joked that an inability to pay attention to one thing for long underscored his career. Few knew he was suffering from cancer. Today his Facebook page announced David Bowie died peacefully today, surrounded by his family. Later confirmed by his son, Duncan Jones, who said, "Very sorry and sad to say it's true. I'll be offline for a while. Love to all." The singer died just days after the release of what would be his last album, Black Star, on his 69th birthday last week. It has been critically acclaimed. One more face of a superstar who presented so many in a career that influenced so many of his contemporaries.
In for David Bowie, the iconic British musician who's died in New York after battling cancer.
Put on your red shoes and dance the blues.
He influenced the generation with his image, his style, and of course, his music.
I felt really comfortable going on stage as somebody else. And it seemed a rational decision to keep on doing that. And so I got quite besotted with the idea of just creating character after character.
His son, film director Duncan Jones, confirms Bowie's death in a tweet, saying the news was sad but true. Tributes at his birthplace as politicians, clerics, actors and an astronaut joined global reaction to news of his death.
He poured different aspects of art into the presentation of his music. He was the absolute sort of definitive fusion of pop music, fashion and art.
We'll be looking back at the life of a man who changed the course of contemporary music. Also this lunchtime, the partner of former EastEnders star Cyan Blake, found dead with her 2 young sons, is set to appear before court in Ghana. Anglican church leaders from around the world gather, trying to avoid a split over the issue of homosexuality. Princess Christina, the sister of the King of Spain, has appeared in court on charges of tax fraud.
After this afternoon on BBC London, a former head of counter-terrorism police believes a refugee camp in Calais could threaten London. And from life on Brixton to life on Mars, we look at the legacy of the megastar Londoner.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. It's one of those do you remember where you were when you heard the news moments. The announcement this morning of the death of David Bowie has brought tributes from around the world, from people from all walks of life. The star died at his home in New York after an 18-month battle with cancer. He was 69 and released what would be his last album on Friday, his birthday. It wasn't just Bowie's music, though that on its own brought iconic status, but also the personas he created, which broke boundaries, the unconventional, striking visual images that challenged perceptions of music, fashion and gender. Born in London, David Bowie went on to carve out a career that changed the path of contemporary music. David Silito now looks back at his life.
Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Sailors fighting in the dance hall. Oh man, look at those cavemen go.
Where do you start? The songs, the ever-changing appearance, the blurred sexuality, the mystique. If you want to understand the look and feel of the 70s, David Bowie is as good a place to begin as any. And now he's gone. A single message from his son Duncan. Very sorry and sad to say it's true. I'll be offline for a while. Love to all. He died, it said, peacefully, surrounded by family, after an 18-month battle with cancer.
Not only is it the last show of the tour, but it's the last show that we'll ever do.
What was it that made Bowie so special? This is the moment in 1973 when he killed off Ziggy Stardust, a pop character. There were gasps, despair. It wasn't just the music. He was like an alien who had arrived to rewrite the rules of what you could do, how you could look. A few months later, he reappeared with an entirely different look and sound.
I felt really comfortable going on stage as somebody else, and it seemed a rational decision to keep on doing that. And so I got quite besotted with the idea of just creating character after character.
Time is waiting in the way.
Soul music, Jacques Brel, Anthony Newley. He was a musical jackdaw. He'd studied mime, hung out with Iggy Pop and Lou Reed, and at one point he changed his entire sound in the middle of a tour.
If you take this assignment, you'll have complete authority.
And in The Man Who Fell to Earth, he played an alien struggling to relate to the world he was in. It was alarmingly close to real life. He was falling apart. Drugs were taking over.
You can be heroes just for one day.
He had to escape. He went to Berlin and with Brian Eno created music that the critics adored. But this was about much more than just the music.
It was an extraordinary fusion of absolutely brilliant music. You know, you can't forget what a fabulous lyricist he was, what an interesting lyricist, you know. The way that he poured different aspects of art into the presentation of his music. He was the absolute sort of definitive fusion of pop music, fashion and art.
What came next was the era of video. Again, Bowie was ahead of the pack. And this was the peak of his chart success. His new, clean-cut, MTV-friendly style made money, but didn't make him happy.
Artistically and aesthetically, it was probably my lowest point.
If he was worried he'd become too mainstream, the noise created by his Tin Machine project solved that problem. In the 90s, he embraced a new invention, the internet. But his appearances in public gradually became rarer and rarer. Then, unexpectedly, a final burst of creativity. An older, frailer Bowie, but still recognisably the man who always wanted to move forward. That restless desire to change. His echoes are all around us in the landscape of pop culture. Influential is almost an understatement when it comes to David Bowie.
Well, in the hours since news of David Bowie's death emerged, there's been a stream of tributes from those who worked with him or those who simply loved his work. From prime ministers and archbishops to actors and even an astronaut in space. Tony Visconti, who worked closely with him, said this: he always did what he wanted to do, and he wanted to do it his way. And he wanted to do it the best way. His death was no different from his life, he said, a work of art. Nick Hyam now with more reaction to Bowie's death.
Starman by David Bowie, an artist who always had just a touch of the unearthly about him. Among the tributes on Twitter, Britain's current starman, astronaut Tim Peake, who said Bowie's music was an inspiration to many. Madonna said she was devastated, describing Bowie as a great artist who changed her life. Actor Ricky Gervais wrote, "I just lost a hero, R.I.P. David Bowie." Rocker Billy Idol said he was nearly brought to tears by news of Bowie's passing, and Prime Minister David Cameron said he grew up listening to Bowie, a master of reinvention who kept getting it right.
Today we're mourning the loss of an immense British talent. I mean, genius is an overused word, but I think musically, creatively, artistically, David Bowie was a genius.